welcome. I'm just letting folks get in and get settled. Appreciate everyone joining tonight. We'll get started here in just a second. I'm just checking the call to see how many people we have joining.
Hi,
All right.
Sarah.
We got Cedar on. Hey there, Cedar.
Oh, hey.
All right.
Cool. It's the whole gang.
It's the whole gang, right? All right. Well, let's get going then. Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Miller. Welcome to the Oregon Timber Trail Alliance's first, I guess this is our second virtual open house. We had one on April 7th, which was pretty good, and we're going to copy that same format here. I'll be moderating tonight's open house. Help me out behind the scenes are Jeff Kingman and Steve Brook. You might be hearing from them occasionally. We are all part of now a 9-person board of volunteers that make up the Oregon Timber Trail Alliance. We're a 501c3. We are looking for more board members to help lead and support the organization and some of the activities. So if you're interested, you can check that out on our website. Our organization keeps the Oregon Timber Trail route alive through events like this open house, trail work parties, education events like Bikepacking 101. We maintain the navigation files, and we also host the website and social media accounts. As a nonprofit, we do welcome donations in whatever way you can works for you, either financial donations, or if you have time to come out and help out on trail work, that'd be great as well. We welcome all. Today we have 4 panelists, 3 of whom finished the route last year. And they're going to share information and about their ride and how they planned for it and some of the experiences they had. And this is an open house, so we do welcome your questions. Over the next hour, we'll cover 5 main topics. Each of these will be about 10 to 15 minutes long. And then at 8 o'clock, we'll open up with a 30-minute just open question and answer session. The 5 main topics that we'll cover are choosing a variant. There is the traditional route, which is mostly single track, and then there's also a new gravel route. The next topic is when to start your ride, and then getting to the start and back home afterwards, and then navigation and staying on course, and planning for food and water. So those are the 5 main topics. We'll be hitting each one of those as we go through, and asking questions to the panel to speak to some of those topics. Some general housekeeping. What do we have on the call? We had about 130 people registered. Not sure how many people joined, probably about 30 or 40 so far. So we do have to set up some ground rules. We'll post these in the chat. And they're pretty basic. Your microphones will stay muted during the session to eliminate background noise. You can feel free to keep your camera on or turn it off, whichever your preference is. Please use the chat as you'd like, but also please stay respectful. Keep it on topic. Any disparaging comments, anything off topic, or anything inappropriate will be noted. And if the violation is severe enough, we can remove you from the call. That's not going to happen, but we do hold that right. Keep an eye on the chat. We'll be posting links for other info. As well as some of the information that's shared during this discussion. And then for each topic, just to give you a format of how things are going to go, for each topic, I'm going to give the panelists a kickoff question for that main topic. If you do have a question around that topic, please put it in the chat and we'll try to get it answered. Let's see. So our time is a bit tight, so we'll likely get to just a few of the questions, but we do want to keep a record of them so we can track what people are asking, so we can provide better information later on. And then, like I said, at 8 we'll start an open question and answer session. This is where you can ask the question directly to the panelists if you'd like. If you do have a question, please raise your hand and we'll call on you and unmute you so you can ask your question. If you don't want to ask your question directly, you can put it in the chat. That's what happened last time on the last open house. Most of those questions came through the chat, and it was great. Jeffrey will be the one calling on people, and he'll try to keep track of who's first and all that. Let's see. And keep your questions brief and to the point. We were trying to get as much time for our panelists to respond rather than a long drawn out question. This session, like the last one, is being recorded, and we'll put it on our website and associated social media accounts. This is like I said, the second one we've done. So if you have any suggestions on this open house or anything else that you think our organization can do, please let us know. You can put it in the chat, send us an email, however you'd like. But we are looking for feedback on this open house and the topics that we're covering. We will be asking you some poll questions throughout the evening. I think there's 4 or 5 of them, and they're just kind of general questions, mainly just to get some information about who the people that are interested in riding the trail, where you're coming from, things like that. If you don't want to answer the question, it's fine. You're not going to be held to it. Okay, so now I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Sarah Cohnfall, Chris Wilson, Garrett Murphy, and Chip Andrus. Sarah, Chip, and Garrett finished the Oregon Timber Trail race last year, and Chip was also that year's race director. There is another race this year. It kicks off July 12th. That's being directed by others. While obviously there's a lot of overlap between our organization and the race itself, we are not sponsoring the race. We're not affiliated with the race in any sort of legal format. But you can, come to us for information about the race and the route itself too. Let's see. Okay, so get to some introductions. Sarah's Canadian and currently lives in Marquette, Michigan. In addition to riding the Oregon Timber Trail last year, she placed first in the women's division of the Smoke and Fire race in Idaho, has toured parts of Europe and South America, and completed the Great Divide mountain bike route from Canada to Mexico. Chris Wilson is from Olympia, Washington. Chris has made some really, really good long-form videos of his bikepacking adventures in Arizona, Utah, Oregon, and Washington. They're fantastic, really well done. Check them out on YouTube. We'll drop some links in the chat if that's not already in there. Yep, looks like they're in there. And then Garrett Murphy. Garrett, living a nomadic life, currently sitting in Anchorage, Alaska. So in addition to the Oregon Timber Trail, his bikepacking adventures include rides in New Zealand and the Great Divide mountain bike route, among others. And then last but not least, we have Chip Andrus. Chip holds a legendary status in the Pacific Northwest bikepacking community. He's been riding here or bikepacking here, probably before many folks on the call were alive. Starting out in taking his red Schwinn Continental up into Mount Rainier wearing nothing but a backpack. Still counts as bikepacking. Okay, so those are our panelists. We're going to keep on going, moving pretty fast. So this topic is choosing your variant. There are 2 main routes of the Oregon Timber Trail. There's the traditional single track route, and now there's a new gravel road route. The traditional route is about 770 miles long or so. About 55% of that is single track, lots and lots of climbing. That route it's not like the Pacific Crest Trail where it's like one contiguous, single track. It is a conglomeration of lots of different trails, roads, pavements, double track, gravel, mostly single track. And most of the trail is maintained. It was built and maintained by local mountain bike groups. That includes Oak Ridge Trail Alliance, Central Oregon Trail Alliance, Sisters Trail Alliance, 44 Trails Association, and the Hood River Area Trail Steward. The Oregon Timber Trail Alliance supports these other organizations. We do some trail maintenance events, but they really maintain 99% of the trail. We do a lot in the southern tier since there's no bike clubs down that way. But shout out to those organizations for keeping those trails open. So neither of these routes are easy. Some of the trails are really hard to ride, especially on a loaded bike. There's steep grades, down trees, poor tread, brush can lead hours and hours of walking. Combination of tough trail conditions and isolation can be pretty overwhelming for folks. Um, most folks will have to do some kind of combination of the traditional route and gravel roads or the gravel route. This is due to wildfires, trail closures, things like that. And then also keep in mind, you can bypass some of the harder trail sections. Those include Cox Pass, Bear Creek, Yamsey Mountain, Bunchgrass Ridge, Olali Lake. Those are incredibly difficult sections, so you can work your way around them to avoid those and stay on gravel and stay on the route. And then speaking of the gravel, that is a great option. It opens up the experience to a much broader or wider diversity of riders, and it's a lot less stressful adventure, a little bit easier to work through. All right, enough of me talking. Sarah, this one's coming. This question's for you. If you would tell us a bit about your trail experience. Did the version of the trail you rode meet your expectations? And then, are there variations which you would consider doing over again?
Yeah, sure. So it did meet my expectations, which is the short answer. Um, I guess, yeah, I had done a lot of research on it before, so I think kind of like one of the experiences is like estimating how hard it's going to be and then like experiencing how accurate you were and like like how estimating how far you're going to make it in a day and then like seeing how that matches up. So I think I did an oak, and there was and we didn't talk about this last time, but there was another person who did an I or started an ITT like the week before, and I remember like watching their tracker, and like there were definitely times during the day I was checking, I was like, whoa, like this section is taking a really long time. So that kind of, yeah, it was like part of the experience was like seeing how hard it was and like how that lined up with what my expectations were. um but I think as like the first day came to an end and just realizing that like I got kind of as far as I like minimally hoped to, and then because I also only had a certain amount of time to do the whole route, getting back to work and stuff. So I think like just the like, yes, I'm doing it part was like very one of the routes I've done that was like the most gratifying experience for that. Especially I think we'll talk a lot about like the first 200 miles. So it was definitely making it from like the start to like civilization in Chemult again was like I remember turning the corner onto the highway in Chemult and like a big semi went by right off the bat, and it was like, whoa. It was just such a contrast with like the solitude of the past. It was like 3.5 days or something like that. So yeah, that's kind of a quick snapshot, I think, of like kind of just my expectations and how it went. And then one more quick thing, and I think the others will comment on this too, is we didn't get to like ride the full route because of the forest fires that I think was like day 4 they hit. So there's a little bit of like bittersweet slash regret almost, even though it was out of our control. But like it was great, making it to the end. But then it was like, oh, we missed one of the hardest sections, which is the Bunchgrass Trail. And I think there's a couple more fires that prevented us from doing other sections. So it was kind of bittersweet a little bit too.
Gotcha. Okay. Garrett or Chris, anything to add? Like just about your trail experience? Was it kind of what you were expecting, or easier or harder?
Garrett, I'll let you go ahead and go first.
Yeah, it was definitely a bit harder than I was expecting, for sure. I like the fact that there are the deviated portions for the hard segments. Like I knew for sure Bunchgrass Ridge was not going to be on my to-do list for this trail no matter what. And I kind of was lucky enough to be able to get into the Grand Apart and meet some of these people and kind of buddy up and learn a bit more. A notoriously bad planner, say it first to say it. And it's like, I didn't really know exactly what I was getting into, but you can see some of the stats. And it is like 10% rideable or 10% unrideable, which is at least 70 miles of hike a bike. And for me, that was a much higher number than that. I do love hiking, so that helped a lot. But having those variations of the gravel route that you can toss in the mix to skip some of the parts, that gave me a lot of security and comfort when planning this route, because I was like, worst case, I'll just do the gravel route and I'll get up to Hood River. I'll figure it out, or I'll go another way. So having those variations, super helpful, because I was a bit shocked, especially in the first 200 miles to Schmaltz. I was like, whoa. So
Gotcha. All right. Thanks, Chris.
I'd just say for me, like I feel like I had a pretty good idea of what I was getting into, and I think choosing the single track version of the route, like I think the riding's it's highly engaging. It feels like more of an adventure. You get, highs and lows. There's some really tough parts. There's some chill parts. You get these like beautiful alpine lakes. So like I was really happy with how things turned out. To Sarah's point, we had to skip some of the kind of fun single track and probably the crux of the route, which was bunchgrass, which was unfortunate. I like a little bit of like suffering on the route, right? When I can get that. And so I overall, like, I think it was just kind of exactly what I was looking for in an adventure ride. And just a really healthy mix of highs, lows, fun riding, hard riding, chill riding. And so I'd say if you're considering like which version do I want to do, I would think about whether or not a reasonable amount of hike a bike and single track some chunky sections, that's something that you're into. If the answer is no, maybe go with the gravel version. If you're up for, some long stretches of pushing, like definitely do the single track route. You're gonna love
I'll take that as an endorsement for suffering. So,
it.
all right, thanks. We're gonna get on to the next topic, which is I don't see any questions, so we'll just keep on motoring along. Again, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat whenever you want. So we're talking about when to start when you're planning your ride. The trail can be ridden from about mid-June to late October. Probably same thing with the gravel route itself. Gravel probably clears out a little bit earlier, but not much. Anyway, you can ride from mid-June to October in most years, depending on the snow level. This year, we have a lot of snow, so it might be a little bit later. If you start too soon, you'll be pushing through snow, and the trails won't be cleared. Start too late, wildfire season picks up. September is a great time to ride because the wildfires and the bugs have kind of died down a bit. Trails have been cleared, so that's a good time to go as well. But no matter what, you need to be flexible with your plans. So, Chris, I wanted to ask you this next question. How much did the weather and fire conditions influence your ride? I know that you were doing the race, so the start date was fixed, but would you choose a different time of year to do that ride?
Right. Yeah. So a few things there. Number one, the weather dramatically impacted the ride. When we started, I think we were like in a heat wave, so it was like really hot at the beginning of the ride. So like day one, we were just getting punished with the heat. And so I think a lot of people felt that. And there's some water scarcity concerns on the first 200 miles. Like you got to be kind of on it and make sure that you're filling up the critical water spot. So, that coupled with the heat again, made for the first day was just like, oof, okay, this is going to set the tone for the rest of the ride, right? And then, there was wildfires throughout the ride that impacted our route. And so a couple things to say there. One, there's a link posted to Watch Duty. Definitely get Watch Duty. It's an app where you can monitor wildfires. That came in clutch. The other thing was Chip was super valuable in posting reroutes around some of these key areas that were impassable due to fire. So big shout out to Chip. But yeah, so that all dramatically influenced our ride. As far as when I would go again personally, I would, if you've never done a Grand Depart before, I'd recommend it. It's really fun. I had a great time riding with Sarah and Garrett and Patrick, who's on this call, my buddy Paul. And so like it changes the experience. So if you're into that, I'd say definitely consider doing the Grand Depart. If you want to do it kind of solo, then I would err on the side of going earlier in the season. And that's because I'd rather deal with pushing through snow and even blowdowns than the risk of wildfires, which I think in the Pacific Northwest are becoming more and more just a matter of fact during the summer. So I'd rather kind of deal with some slower days than riding through smoke and risking skipping some of these like really prime premier sections of single track. So yeah, maybe earlier, like mid-June is probably a good starting point. And then mid-June through July. And again, I'd say if you can do the Grand Depart, it's pretty fun. So.
Right on. Thanks.
Yeah.
Garrett, got anything to add to that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I started a little bit later than I wanted to, but that actually coincided perfectly with the Grand Depart. So that's how I ended up meeting all these great folks. I think that just as Chris said, the fires were a huge problem, and I think that was a pretty bad snow year last year. I don't know for sure, but I feel like maybe it was worse than normal. But yeah, I had planned on starting in mid-June, and then a couple things popped up, and I had to be more flexible and wait. And that would maybe be better. The fires do become a major issue, and we all saw that. Um, we saw the damage from years prior. It's a consistent problem, and it is going to remain that way. So beating those fires out would be pretty important, I think. And the snow, not as bad of a deal, I think.
Right. Okay, thanks. Hey, Chip, I was hoping to get your take on this question. Um, what's your experience in terms of, when to do what's the best time to do the ride, basically?
I think fall is an overlooked opportunity to ride this route. Um, the mosquitoes are dead by then, which is a great boon. The trails have been cleared for the summer, and you don't have to think about snow unless you're too late in the fall, and then it starts up again. Sometimes the wildfires will slop over into September and October, though, so you're not home free on that front. And Southern Oregon is dried out and kind of brown by fall, and you have to be more careful with finding water. But, early summer has this great advantages too. This is a different set of challenges.
So based on your understanding of the snowpack this year, when do you think the gravel route would be available?
Mid-June. They had a near record snowpack this winter in Southern Oregon, but it's melting fast now with the warm weather. So it's the two high points for the trail version, the summit of the Cascades and then the first 20 miles. I think they're going to be melted off by the 4th of July.
Okay, great. All right, we are going to keep on going. Sarah, I don't want to leave you out though. Do you have anything you want to add to that may have been missed?
Well, I'll jump on what Chris said about if you've never done a Grand Depart, it's really fun, especially if you do like the social stuff the day before. And then an extra added benefit is there'll probably be people in front of you and behind you, and which means that you see tire tracks. And so when the trail disappears, you can just follow like tire tracks, which sometimes those aren't super accurate. So it was just cool to see. There was some burn areas where you see like all the tire tracks are like all on the same page until you get to this one area, and then like you can see like one person went this way, one person went this way, and one person went straight, and it's just entertaining because you're like, wow, I wonder how their day is going. So
which way do I go? I think the Grand Depart for the race is July 12th, if I remember correctly. I think the gravel route, Grand Depart, which isn't a race, I think it's June 28th. Chip, if I'm wrong on that, please interrupt me. But look that up. I think the Grand Depart would be a great way to go, and plus you get to meet a lot of cool people along the way. All right, we are going to. I don't see any June 28th confirmed yet. So June 28th for the gravel part. Let's see. Going to get to getting to and from the route. So the route starts in a very isolated part of Southern Oregon, passes through sparsely populated areas as it winds northward. Most people get there coming from Portland to Klamath Falls, which is a 5-hour drive. Then Klamath Falls to Lakeview, which is 2 hours, and then Lakeview to Deep Creek Campground, which is a 1-hour drive. So pretty much a full day of driving to get there. The gravel route does start in Lakeview itself. There is no easy way to get to Lakeview. You can take a train from Portland to Klamath Falls, but you're still 2 hours away. There's no car rental shops in Lakeview to drop off a rental car. You can get a U-Haul truck because there's a U-Haul shop in Lakeview, but it's a bit of a challenge to get from Klamath Falls to Lakeview. There is the option of hiring an outfitter or a shuttle. Cedar Keys is on the call today, and he runs Oregon Territory Outfitters. you can find his website in the chat. And maybe work out something with him. There might be some other services like that, but I'm not quite sure what they are. There is a bike shop in Lakeview, Tall Town Bikes and Camping. So they could be, Tom Batty runs that. He's also sits on our board. He runs that shop, so he might be a good resource. Garrett, I did want to ask you, because I know you made some friends along the way in your route down to Klamath Falls, but how difficult was it for you to arrange transportation to get you to the start and then back home? And any suggestions or tips for folks?
Yeah, it's definitely was one of those things I had to put a lot of thought into before I started out. The route, the way that I got to the start of the trail, I flew to Portland, which has a bike assembly station in the airport. That's really handy. I haven't seen that in many airports, but Portland is one of those spots. And I hopped on the Amtrak and I took the Amtrak down to Klamath Falls. And then I rode my bike over to Lakeview from there over the course of about a day and a half, all on the highway. It was super hot and it's really not that convenient, but it is a way you can go. And it's maybe the most affordable. The bike tickets to accompany your train ticket do sell out. So if you are going to take the train, it's better to book it in advance and not last minute. That way you can ensure you can get your bike on the train because they have limited space if you are taking the train. A lot of the other riders took Cedar, Oregon Territory Outfitters. It drove people from multiple pickup locations all across Oregon, starting in Portland, down to Klamath Falls, Lakeview, Oakland, maybe. I can't remember all the stops, but there's a variety of things there. And overall, it's quite a good value for your money to get you to the start of the trail. And I think even if you're not doing the Grand Depart, you can still hit up Cedar and get a ride down. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, Cedar, because you are here. So overall, like that's a lot of admin, and that was like 3 full days of travel from Portland to get over to Lakeview for me to just get started. Adding on to the Grand Depart was really great because I was able to get from Lakeview to the very start of the trail, kind of that herd mentality. Everybody's there, everybody's going. It's kind of fun. It's exciting. We're all going at once. So Chip was nice enough to offer me a ride for that last little stint to get to the very end. In the trail notes, there's some variations that also give some good information about how to get to the start or from the end of the trail. And then there's variations on the route where you can start from Klamath Falls or Lakeview if you want to skip some of the southern tier or southern portions of that southern tier. And then I thought overall, if you're going with the group, it's a pretty good situation. There are options out there, specifically Cedar or the Amtrak. And if you're flexible, that helps a lot. But it's going to be expensive. So be ready to spend some money to get to the start of this trail, no matter where you're coming from, unless you live in Lakeview, which very few people do.
Right.
Once you get up to the end of the trail, there's an amazing service, the Cat Bus, that will get you into Portland again with your bike for $10, which is insane. Couldn't believe how cheap it was. They run multiple a day. And it's a really, really easy thing to get down the gorge back to Portland, and completely reasonable resource. And if you were to head southbound, you could start in Portland and head back up and then figure it out the opposite way as well. But I found one of the biggest challenges for planning for me was how do I get to Lakeview in the first place, especially on a budget.
Right. Great, thanks. Hey, Sarah, I think you came the farthest. What was your story to get there?
Yeah, it's either Garrett or I. I don't know. We might be tied for coming from the
Okay.
farthest. But yeah, it's definitely so. I also had to fly to Portland. So that was a big trip in itself. And initially, I had booked a ticket with Amtrak, and I was gonna wait till like the last. I was hoping I could maybe. There's a Facebook group actually. I recommend joining that. I think there's already some people here that like posted about like carpooling. So I was gonna kind of hope that I could maybe get a carpool ride with someone from Klamath Falls after taking the train down there. So I was really excited when Chip set up the shuttle with Cedar, and that took. Initially, I was even still gonna take the train, and then I asked Cedar to like pick me up in Klamath Falls, but then I was like, well, I may as well just get on the bus first thing in the morning and skip the train. So I definitely recommend the shuttle if it's in your budget. I did think it was pretty good. Really, I thought it was a good price. Can't remember what it was though. But anyways, and the other cool thing about taking the shuttle is it kind of reminded me of being a kid at summer camp, except with adults where you like take a shuttle to like go to the beach or like go to camp or something like that. And then, by the end of the shuttle ride, I felt just really good camaraderie with all the other riders, and it was fun hearing, what people's goals and plans were, and like, where people were coming from. And then, yeah, I think we all kind of hung out the night before at the ski hill, which was pretty cool too. Wasn't good for going to bed early, but was still pretty fun. So yeah, I definitely recommend, like, if if it's in your budget and you can swing it, I definitely recommend the shuttle.
Gotcha. Great. Thanks. We did have a question in the chat. I want to get on to the next topic, but I think it's a good question. And Chip, this one I think is best for you to answer. Brian Anthony asks, is the Alturas start not common anymore? And we did change the start of the route from just south of California to the Deep Creek campground, mainly for logistics reasons. Chip, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Starting Alturas, I think was an idea at one time when they had local bus service, but I don't think that bus service exists anymore. So it'd be a bit of a bike ride to get to the start from Alturas.
So if getting to the start's already hard, if you want it to be harder, just keep on going to Alturas. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Chip. Okay, now we're going to start talking about more on the trail stuff. So this next topic is staying on the course, navigation. As I mentioned before, the trail itself is a collection of roads and individual trail segments, and only a portion of those are well marked. The route does include some trail sections for recent burns that are now overgrown with brush, so it's hard to even see where the trail is. Since there is so many, the requirements of making route change choices on the go, you pretty much need to have a GPS unit. Some people have done it with paper maps, but get a good GPS unit, learn how to use it. That'll help with navigations and especially getting around wildfires. We did complete a project last year where we put up tags marking the route. They're not quite enough to use those tags just for navigation. So they help, but you can't rely on them to get you through the whole thing. The navigation files are available on our website. Those are the GPX files. Each section of the main trail and its variation does have a link to the Ride with GPS route where you can download the file and use Ride with GPS to navigate. We will try to help with some of the reroute recommendations through the riding season. Mainly, due to alternatives due to wildfires. But your safety is your own responsibility. You need to understand how to use those resources that are available. The Forest Service website will have the most accurate information. Watch Duty app is fantastic. So make sure you understand how to use that beforehand. Let's see. And then, familiarize yourself with the Forest Service and the trail websites where they announce the trail closures. So, Sarah, I wanted to ask you, navigating the trail, how difficult was that for you? What would you recommend for others to help stay on course?
Yeah, so I think it'll depend on how much experience you have doing like bikepacking in general, but single track routes in particular, and just like different kinds of terrain. Like sometimes even in the desert, the trail's not overgrown, but there's not like there's just bushes everywhere. So just will depend a little bit on your experience. So I was definitely expecting, because there's like some blogs online and reports of other people doing the trail. So like going into it, I knew that there was going to be sections bushwhacking. Like people had mentioned bushwhacking, and I think most likely I would recommend there's several sections in the first 200 miles that at some point you will probably end up bushwhacking a little bit. There were spots where you're like, yeah, definitely on the trail, and then like the trail's like just gone. Just like those overgrowth, those places that are really overgrown, or like where the wildfires went through. So that was kind of my experience. I lost the trail. I definitely recommend having like a navigation unit of some sort like on your bike, so you can kind of know where the GPX track is, and like as long as you know you're off, but it's like somewhere over to the right, it's like eventually you're gonna get back onto it. So I had a Wahoo, which is like a little bike computer and kind of like shows me where I am. And then I had multiple different types of maps on like different apps on my phone to like see more detail and like elevation, some of the waypoints that are marked from the route. No paper maps. I think Joe, you asked about that. That's probably not a bad idea. So just like two maps. So if I lost one, I would still have the other. Which on other trips I've been like, I think it's like reasonable security safety level. And then I also had, I think we all, or most of us had, especially if you're like doing the tracker thing, then you probably have a tracker as well. So like if you get in like really really serious trouble, that I'd recommend having something like that. So that's kind of what else. Oh, and then tree markers were great at nighttime in the sections that they were there because you could see them in the dark. So there was a couple of times at night where, yeah, I used the markers were great, even though they're not everywhere. So yeah, don't rely on them, but where they were there, they were noticeable.
Great. All right, thanks. Chris, any stories of getting lost? Were you able to stay on track for the most part?
Yeah, I was, which is surprising because I'm very susceptible to getting lost and going the wrong way. I'll echo some of what Sarah said. Like, I would make sure you have some redundancy. I'd go as far as saying like your head unit, if you have like a GPS, I have a Garmin 1040. I actually like tether that to something on my bike. We were riding with a gal on the first day and she lost her GPS that was like mounted on her bike. And then she was trying to look at her phone and the maps weren't working. So that's no good if like you're by yourself and that happens and you kind of don't really know the lay of the land, like that's a problem. So I would say have some redundancy, make sure that on your phone, like test it, like test the offline, make sure that you got the map there, test your head unit, make sure that the route loads. And I got to ride with others, so that that helps too. Again, you shouldn't rely on that, but that's also kind of a way to make sure that you're sort of staying on course. And then yeah, Sarah mentioned that there's those trail markers; those were super helpful. But overall, like I didn't have too much trouble staying on route, and again, that feels surprising for me. So yeah.
Okay, Garrett, anything to add to that?
I thought it was pretty well marked with the trail markers. I heard a lot of horror stories leading into it, and they did update that, which is awesome. And they are reflective, which Sarah pointed out, and that helps a lot at night. But be ready to be lost in some capacity almost every day, if it's just a little bit. Backtracking, be ready to have like a bit of a plan in place mentally. Prepare yourself to be like, how am I going to find the trail again? One thing I relied on was I'm just going to backtrack to the last marker. Last time I knew I was on the trail for sure. I'm going to start anew. You're going to get lost. It's definitely a part of it, and they're typically very minor. So having a plan, being ready for that is, I think, important.
When you were being rerouted through the, due to wildfires, were you mainly relying on the information that Chip was providing, or did you have to do some innovation on your own and, kind of like plan another route to get around?
I had to do a little bit of planning on my own initially, and then Chip came through and followed up with like a new route that helped out. Because sometimes, like particularly where I was in Chemult, there was like fires happening all around. It kind of felt like I needed to make moves sooner than later. So I did come up with a plan to kind of get around the section that led over to Oak Ridge. And then later on, I was corresponding with Chip, and he set me up, and together we got to a place that was pretty good for everybody.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking like navigating without Chip, providing those inputs, because that's not always available. Chris or Sarah, I don't know if you can speak to any of that at all.
Yeah, I'll add one thing really quickly, which is when I was preparing for this, I downloaded the alternates in addition to the primary route. And I think I even downloaded the gravel route. So like that just made me feel secure with like several bailout options. So if I wasn't, following on that Facebook group and looking at what Chip was posting and getting those reroutes, like I could pretty confidently come up with an alternative option. So another recommendation, like load some bailout options on your GPS, load the gravel ride. I think that's super helpful. Sarah?
Mhm.
Yeah, I did the same thing. So downloading like the alternate routes. Um, and then depending on what app, I really like there's like I use Gaia a lot and it as you download the detail, you can kind of, but it's not always 100% accurate. And I've made up my own routes using Gaia, which have ended in like dead end private property situations and stuff. So, but but yeah, just like something like a good detailed map. So even if you're in a spot where there's no bailouts, you know that you can be like, all right, well, if I go back 6 miles, there's a two track that's like crosses and then that looks like it's heading more towards civilization. So I think having oh yeah, having having yeah, just some map of some sort that can tell you how to get back to civilization if you need to is going to be helpful. Um yeah, that's all I have to. I think I had something else, but I forgot. So
Well, I've got another question for you, and it's about keeping your uh, keeping your devices powered up. What was your setup for for the batteries?
yeah, so I use a power bank. I had a 20,000 milliamp power bank, which was for 10 days was a bit of a stretch because I kept my phone in airplane mode pretty much most of the time. I think other people reckon you could have turned it off. I had mine in airplane mode, but so I had to charge that. The bike computer I had at the time was a Wahoo, so pretty much a full day of riding, like 12 hours of moving time would be like 10% or 5%. So that was actually a big use. So I have a different one now, mostly because I lost that one. Well, actually, so I guess I didn't have it tethered. Anyways, so um, so yeah, if you are planning on buying a new GPS unit or like a new used one, there's like the solar ones are actually probably really awesome. I have a solar one now, so it's great. Like that, just using it all day and then it's still at like 60 or 70% charge. So I had to charge that and then lights. And then I think the lights depends on how much you're going to ride at nighttime. And I think once I made it to, I was a sleeper, like, 2 hours of nighttime riding and then like snooze until like dawn. Um, so I think if you have really bright lights, multiple of them, and you're planning on riding a lot at night, I think the 20,000 milliamps might not cut it for the full 10 days because I think I barely made it through. And I never stopped anywhere where I could actually charge. I tried to charge it up at the bike shop with mixed results. So that's what I used. It made it. I think if you have more than a phone, you're using lights a lot at nighttime, and you have a GPS unit that you need to charge, probably need like a little more than that for like 11 days.
Okay, great, thanks, Garrett. What's your setup like?
I definitely intended to stop and charge at least once, if not twice on the route, but I did bring 20,000 milliamp hour power bank altogether. So that was what I relied on. I also was like filming and I had a camera and a variety of other things that were just there with me that the typical rider might not have. The one tip I have for trying to determine how much power you're going to need is that you can look up how big your phone battery is, or for any device that you have, how many milliamp hours each battery is, and that will give you a good estimation of how many charges you can get out of your battery. So if you have a 6,000 milliamp hour power bank or 6,000 milliamp hour phone battery and a 10,000 milliamp power bank, that's going to take 60% of that power bank to charge it fully. So I give you kind of an idea, and you can work from there. And then I do like to point out that maybe if you are interested in a Dynamo Hub, I have one. I didn't take it. You're not really traveling at a fast enough speed ever to generate enough electricity for that to make a difference. In my opinion, maybe other people have different results, but I have a Sun Dynamo and it wouldn't have done much for me there, and it didn't do a whole lot for me on the Great Divide either. So in these scenarios, you're moving real slow. The Dynamos, maybe not as practical as you'd like it to be.
Great. Chris, you brought a little mini nuclear power plant along with you, I think, to power all your electronics, right?
Yeah, I mean, I could have powered Garrett's stuff, Sarah's stuff, my stuff. And it's just because I like carried so much like camera equipment and all that garbage. So like, here's like a battery bank, and I basically had like a couple of these. So I was fine on power. I think if you didn't carry all that extra garbage, then you could probably get away with one of these or smaller. So yeah. I think just
Great.
being kind of conscious of like, hey, when's my next re-up? And then like being a little bit conscious of your battery life. And then yeah, to Sarah's point, a solar GPS would have been awesome.
Yeah, and those are coming out, so they're available. They're not inexpensive, but all right. Well, thanks for all that good info. We're gonna keep on motoring along here. This next topic, and this is our final topic before we get into our open Q&A. This is about planning for food and water. Some days on the trail, food and water are readily available. Other days, finding food and water will become an obsession, especially in that first 200 miles. In that section, that 200-mile section, there is no food supply stops that are on the route, and there are infrequent water opportunities. So plan on hauling at least 6 liters with you. You'll need to filter whatever water you find. The navigation files do include location of water sources, but in the northern sections where you're crossing creeks a lot, the navigation files don't have everyone. It's more on the southern sections where it's a little bit sparser in terms of finding water. The gravel route is a bit easier to deal with lack of food and water, especially in the southern section, mainly because of accessibility to services, and then more creeks and things like that. Yeah, Garrett, I want to ask you this one. You're planning for food and water. How did you plan for it? How much you bring? What would you recommend to others so they don't end up running short or carrying too much?
It's definitely one of the biggest cruxes of the beginning, and it was something I was losing a bit of sleep over night after night of just like, how long is it going to take me to get to that water source tomorrow for real? Can I camp dry? Blah, blah, blah. The first 200 miles up to Chemalt was like real tough, but there is one option in between that 200 miles, which it took me about 5 days to do that. Is you can get off the route and go to Paisley in the very beginning and grab a minor resupply there. I don't think there's much of a grocery store. I didn't go into town, but you're looking at a gas station style resupply where you're going to be grabbing bars, maybe a Nor packet or two, some ramen, nothing too fancy, but just a bit of calories to get you through. I carried 5 days of food, and I was basing it off of the trail notes. And the trail notes have a good kind of indication of what it's going to take you to get to each segment where there is a resupply. So it's a valuable resource for food especially. So I erred on the side of caution, and I put 5 days of food in my bag. So it's as much as I could. I just barely made it to Chemalt, and that was some really, really hefty days. It wasn't like I wasn't just relaxing all day. I was going pretty hard to make it there, and I was very nervous I was going to run out, and I was getting pretty low. I think Sarah came pretty close as well. And I think a lot of people are struggling to get to Chemalt with like their initial food supply. So one option is get off to Paisley, and then from Chemalt on, I feel like I had enough capacity and enough wherewithal to get to the next resupplies. I had a better understanding of how long things were going to take. So for food, definitely err on the side of caution if you can, and you may need to really push yourself to get to that next resupply, which is what I ended up having to do to Chemalt. In that first 5 days, you're also dealing with higher water capacity because it's the hottest and the driest segment. So being mindful is really important every time you see a water source. The one time I did get pretty dehydrated, I skipped a water source, I didn't top off, and I definitely paid the price, and that dehydration fatigue carried into the next day and made things a bit harder and compounded between the heat and everything else. We had extraordinarily hot year, so there are emojis on like the GPX files that you get with Ride with GPS. I will show you where the water is, especially in the first 5 days. But I carried 6 liters, if not 7, and I felt like the right capacity. But all the food plus all the water, it's a ton on the bike. It's going to slow you down. It's a lot of weight, and there's tons and tons of really bad trail conditions. So always err on the side of caution, especially in the first 200 miles. Do not skip water if you can avoid it. Carry as much as you can and camel up every time you see it, because it gets pretty slow in there. And that's what caught me off guard, was how slow I was moving in between things. So I was like, there's no way it'd take me 5 days to go 200 miles. And it surely did. So
Garrett, I think you just introduced me to a new term, camel up. I've always been in the mindset where the easiest place to carry water is inside your body. So drink as much as you possibly can. Is that what you mean by camel up, or is there something else to it?
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, when you're at water, just make sure you're nice and hydrated before you take off and fill up those.
Just don't get sick. Don't drink so much to get sick. Right. Chris, what was your food and water situation?
Yeah, I mean, I was tweaking pretty hard for the first 4 days too. Like, making it to Chemult, I budgeted 4 days, so carried 4 days of food, and I was like, we have to do this. I think I probably carried like a full thing of Tailwind, and I probably carried it the whole ride. Like, after day 2, I was like, I can't drink this stuff anymore, and I just ended up carrying it the whole time like an idiot. But so I guess my message here is, hopefully I figure this out one day, but you kind of got to know your own body, right? I carried between 5 and 6. I probably had capacity to carry 7 or 8. But I think most of the time I was probably around 5 liters of water. And, it was fine. Just know your water stops. And to Garrett's point, like, if you see water, like, drink some water, fill up. And just, especially in the first 200. And yeah, like, I was freaking out that we weren't going to make it to Chemult in 4 days. We ended up doing it, and it was fine. After that first 200-mile stretch, the resupplies get way easier from a water perspective, from a food perspective. But you still want to study the map and kind of know where these spots are. So yeah, I mean, that would be kind of my primary advice. Know your body, know how you do in the heat, know like the type of food and like electrolytes that work well for you. And yeah, study the map.
All right, Sarah. Oh yeah, go ahead, Chip.
There's another section you need to be careful about, and that's from Detroit Lake to Parkdale. Going at tourist speed, it would probably be about 5 days of riding. There's no resupply en route in that 200 miles.
That'd be food, right? Because there's water sources but no food.
Right.
Okay.
And does the normal route not include that camp store on Lolly Lake? Isn't there a camp store? Or is that not like reliable enough?
It's reliable, a Lolly Lake store, but the official route is actually to the west of the road, and you'd have to go off route to get to the store.
Okay. That I got the name right. The one with the nice view of like Mount Rainier. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So speaking of getting off route to get to the store, was that pretty common you have to do to resupply food? Like, is it mainly gas station food, or is there other?
Yeah, I don't think I went off route, but like, so I did similar to like, cause it was really just like the first 200 miles for, I think the route that we did was the hardest to like figure out how much food you needed. And I had, based on how far, like I had estimated it would take me out 3 days, maybe a little longer. And then because that turnoff was about halfway, I kind of had this rough estimate that like, if I don't get to the river Chihuahuan, I'm pronouncing it wrong again. Anyways, that river that like by, I can't remember, it was like 1 p.m. on the second day, then, well, I was going slower than expected. And it turns out I was going like 5 hours slower than expected. But then when I got there was like a cooler of Cokes and stuff. And then there was like a 9-mile detour. And I was like, gonna be fine. So I did run out of food a little bit. And my lessons learned are, if you have electrolytes, it's not the end of the world. And if you go slow, it's not the end of the world. And it's just not as much fun for a little bit because snacks are fun. But it's very motivating also at the same time because you're like, whoa, I stopped and I ordered like when I got to Chumult, I ordered 3 meals at the Mexican place. So that's the upside as well. But yeah, I don't remember going off route for food at any point. Do you guys?
No, but I think part of the detour around the
Yeah.
section allowed us to get a resupply there along the highway. So I think some of the detours sort of changed that for us. But similar to you, Sarah, I don't really remember ever having to detour much at all for any resupplies.
Okay. We are a little ahead of time, so I want to stay on this topic. Sarah, you mentioned snacks. I'll pose this question to all three of you, starting with Sarah. What are your favorite snacks? What do you like? Where's your happy place in the food and beverage world when you're out in the middle of nowhere on a bicycle?
Yeah, so I think it depends what you have access to, because and one of the downsides of flying to Portland is you don't have as much the luxury of like, because I don't know, I've accidentally packed like a jet cliff shots on an airplane, and that gets like flagged as like potential stuff. So I don't really bring food on the airplane, so I just went to like some grocery store the day before, and got the usual suspects, which aren't super exciting. I definitely at one point I really liked Cliff Bars, but then I ate too many of those. So I don't really remember. I brought some kind of granola protein bar stuff. It wasn't actually, it's probably one of the worst food packings I've ever done, which include which included the plan of Nutella and tortillas, or Nutella, peanut butter, and tortillas. And then I decided to like pre-make the tortillas. But then instead of buying Nutella, I somehow saw some jam that looked great and decided to use jam for the first time. And that was a bad idea, because they were packed to the bottom of my seat bag for like 3 days. And that's one of the reasons I ran out of food, is because the food I did have were 2 jam peanut butter tortillas that basically had gone rancid because it was like so hot, and it was yeah. So don't do the jam, but I think Nutella, peanut butter, and tortillas are a good idea, and maybe cheese too, like string cheese.
Excellent. All right, Garrett, what's when you're down and out and need to reach for a snack to make you happy? What are you reaching for?
Sour gummy worms, for sure.
Ah.
Nothing puts me back on the saddle like some sugar, for sure. When I'm definitely like, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the term bonking or have experienced
Oh,
it
yeah.
personally, but if you're going pretty hard, you're flying pretty close to the sun, and it's a real possibility. A lot of these resupplies are gas station resupplies, which if, when my 13-year-old self is stoked that I'm just like eating hot dogs and Fritos. So kind of getting like next time you're in a gas station, if you haven't done this before, kind of looking around, if I had to eat only out of this gas station for the next 3 days, what would I grab? That's kind of a decent practice. But I love like Frito bean dip and Fritos and the little cheese sauce. You can usually get that at gas stations. I'll make like burritos out of that, which is pretty good stuff, and it stays pretty good without refrigeration. Um, but yeah, I love gas station food when it's hunger is the best seasoning. So I
True.
love non-repetitive food. Variety helps. But sugars and carbs in the day, and try and get fats at night, and protein.
So you made me think that next time I'm in a gas station looking at food, I'll have a different mindset. Chris, we did get a question in the chat about hanging food, which I think you answered. Uh, but did anybody hang your food? What was the bear situation like?
I didn't hang my food. I think the last time I did a route in Idaho the year before, and I did a Grand Depart, and I was probably the only person that made an effort to hang my food. And especially when it's like midnight, and you're like tired, they were like, because that one did go more through grizzly country. But I didn't really do a very good job of hanging it anyways. So, yeah, just I decided to skip it, which I think for like black bears and stuff is not the end of the world.
Yeah, yeah. And I've been kind of monitoring the chat. Yeah, I think the biggest problem with critters and food is the little guys getting into it and eating all your sour gummy worms because they like those things.
Oh.
Yeah, Chris, any other final thoughts on foods? Foods
No,
and sugar?
I mean, if you just bring you know, some cordelette or some cord and like a bear hanging kit and just like have a dry bag and just like raise your stuff, like that's not too much extra weight.
Yeah.
Just usually you're kind of knackered by the time you get to camp and you just eat and you want to go to bed. So, yeah, no other real thoughts except for, yeah, I probably should do a better job of hanging my food, but I didn't and I wasn't worried about it.
Okay, good. And Sarah, thanks for bringing up the stove because that was going to be one of my follow-up questions. Some people bring stoves, some people don't. Sarah, it doesn't sound like you brought a stove. Chris or Garrett,
Yeah,
either of you
I think
guys? Or?
well, I think, and Garrett had a good way of putting this last time, but it just, all the stuff that you bring is great to have it, but you also have to carry it.
Right.
So, and definitely the first 200 miles, it's definitely a route that if you can go light, it probably makes it a lot more fun. So that's kind of the main reason. And I knew that I was planning on kind of riding long days and being tired, like when I stopped and just kind of like going to sleep right away. So, so I didn't bring a stove.
Gotcha. Okay. Chris, did you bring a stove?
No, I didn't bring a stove, and I posted this in the chat, but if I were doing this again, I also would still not bring a stove. I think you can get by without it, and it's just a lot to faff with. You got to deal with like getting like a canister if you're using a canister stove, and it's just like, I don't know. I think at the very end, Garrett shared his fuel and made Paul and I a hot coffee when it was like the last 2 days, and that was a nice treat. But yeah, I was having like the Tailwind has a recovery drink, a coffee recovery drink, and in the morning I would just put that in a cold bottle and shake that up, and like that kind of gave me my coffee fix, and it tasted pretty good. So that's what I would do, and if I did it again, no stove.
So let me ask it this way then. You all were racing it, so time is of the essence. If you were going to go slow, take your time, maybe take a couple days off, um, would you still not bring a stove or would you be a little bit more luxurious about it?
Yeah, I'd bring a stove, and yeah, I'd bring a stove if I was like going in chill mode for sure.
I think if I was in a group and we could divvy up the luxurious
Mhm.
stuff, then yes. If I was by myself again, I still wouldn't bring a stove.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, we are at 8 o'clock, so this is the time where we just go to open Q&A. I haven't seen a lot of questions coming in. Um, I do have some keyed up, or I should say some topics keyed up that I want to talk about. Um, but if anyone does have a question that you want to throw to our panel, please raise your hand and Jeffrey will field those. And Jeffrey, if those come in, please let me know or interrupt me. Um, I did want to, the two things I want to talk about that we didn't cover so far, and that was training, like how did you all get ready for it, and then dealing with mechanicals and bike issues on the route. So let's start with the bike issues first. My understanding is there's only two bike shops along the route, and there was a lot of people that had some mechanicals. Did you all have any mechanical issues? What was your experience with that?
Uh, I guess I'll start. And last time I answered this, and I was like, no mechanicals, everything was fine. And then I thought, I was like, wait a minute, I had a bunch of problems. When I got to Oak Ridge, like I was having some problems with my back wheel and like just like really bad shifting. And I have an Industry 9 hub, and when I ended up getting home, I realized that I totally broke the axle. And so like I finished like the last 3 days with a broken axle. I don't know how that worked. It was like inside the hub body or something. So that was an issue. And then I had a front rack made by like Good Day Curiosity, and that ended up breaking on like the second to last day. So luckily I'm schlepping around this giant backpack, and so I just threw all my stuff in there. So I guess those were the two mechanicals I had. Fortunately, they didn't prove to be like catastrophic and trip ending, though that hub issue that I discovered when I got home was a pretty shocking discovery. But bring extra brake pads, I would say, and like have some kit to like do reasonable maintenance on your bike and get you out of a jam, like a spare derailleur hanger, that kind of stuff. That's what I would say.
Sarah, what was your repair
Um,
kit like? What was your
yeah,
experience?
I forget what was in there, but bikepacking.com has whatever bikepacking, they're like minimal kit guidance thing. I think I got out. So I had one one brake pad set, so it's like, I'd only if I needed to change out both the front and the rear, I could just do like one side, but that would be fine. Um, the usual, lots of like things to patch a hole or rip or various things. I was tubeless. I think most people are probably doing tubeless. So I've quite a fair bit of experience. I think most of the bike packing trips I've done, it all comes down to like fixing a hole in your tire. So I had I kind of go overkill on that stuff. Maybe some like spare chain links. I think I have like a chain brake tool. But yeah, just the recommended basics that exist in various people that are more expert than me that they write articles about it. So whatever, whatever they said, and then for training, I think so. I don't really train too much, but I do ride a lot. So I think it depends. I think you want to have lots of hours. And I live in a place where the snow, like the trails still have snow on them right now. So it's like it's hard to like get miles in early. But I think about 3 months out and I tried to not like be too lazy over the winter, but I think like 3 months out is when I started thinking about it. When I was biking, I was doing so intentionally to get ready for this ride, which is actually more preparation than I ever did before. Partly because it was like earlier in the season for me, but also it seemed like a route, and I think this was true. Like the more fit or like comfortable you're going to be pushing and doing long hours, the more fun it's going to be too, because you're just not going to get tired as fast. It was more that was my goal of like training, but I didn't really. I put some hours in and made some kind of plan. Yeah, so it's the route that I prepared for the most out of like all the ones I've done.
Right. So the old adage of don't let yourself get out of shape in the first place.
Probably a little bit, and then maybe 3 months, depending on
Yeah.
your
Plus
age
three.
and stuff, some other stuff. I don't know.
Okay. Um, Garrett, I want to get to you on this question. We did have some questions in the chat come through about bike type, and I know that you had so we say, unusual selection of bikes to configurations. Can you tell us what you had set up, and if money was no object, what sort of bike would you be on?
Oh, yeah. So I kind of had to choose between doing the route or buying a new bike, and I just decided to do the route, and I rode it on
Great
a
answer.
fully rigid drop bar bike. Not recommended at all. It was tough on the bike for sure. I like probably blew up the headset. Things were weird. I bent the handlebars. I fell a lot. I pushed a lot more than usual. The saving grace was that I had 2.6-inch tires on that bike, 29er, 2.6. So that was great. Maxxis, big fat tires. And it was definitely taking a beating on my body as a whole. I was so sore in my shoulders and back. The next day, the day after I finished, I couldn't get out of bed because my back was in so much pain. Um, so that was tough. If money was no object at all, I would be riding like 120 millimeter hardtail with 29ers and 2.3 or bigger tires. Some real cush to get it going. Definitely want to rock tubeless. Lots of potential for pinch flats out there. And then I carried like a variety of repair material for, my chain, a needle and a thread to stitch up a sidewall tear. There are 2 bike shops out there for sure, but you're a long way from them almost always, especially when things are really going wrong.
And where are they? Is there one in Oak Ridge?
Mm-hmm.
And
Oak Ridge, and there is Sisters as well.
Right. Okay.
I believe.
Gotcha. Any mechanical issues for you aside from bending things, but nothing, no breakage, bones or otherwise?
No, I think a lot of the people that didn't finish had a big problem mechanically. Like it's just almost luck of the draw that sometimes your hub blows up, sometimes your wheel is bent irreparably. I had a couple of close calls where I think I probably would have lost a wheel if I didn't just bail off the bike. So there is a real risk that you will have a catastrophic mechanical and not be able to finish. And I think that is pretty common out there.
Mhm.
The trail's tough. And then as you're getting more exhausted, you start to take more liberties. I do, at least. I start to just be like, that'll be fine. Or I'm just not necessarily paying as much attention or as cautious or responsive as I should be. And the bike just takes the brood of that stuff. At one point, I just went over the handlebars. I don't even know what happened. And my bike was perched upside down perfectly on its seat and handlebars. And I was like, well,
You did it with style.
yeah. So,
Yeah, it sounds like the bigger tires are probably your best feature of a bike.
yes.
Joe.
Yeah.
Joe, we do have a question from Barry Sherwood. I don't know if you want to just have him unmute and ask away. It's about packing lists.
Sure, Barry, if you want to throw it out so you don't have to, everyone doesn't have to hear me talk.
Yeah, I just kind of wonder if anybody besides me being a nerd makes a spreadsheet with everything that they're taking on the bike and weigh it out and figure out what you have in your, in my case, a backpack and what's on my bike. My bike isn't really set up for bike packing. So other than a bar bag, I just have to kind of strap things to the frame and have like the triangle bag or anything like that. I'm always curious what people take, what they leave out. And I certainly have my list, be happy to share it. Not that I'm a pro, you guys are pros. I'm an amateur and overweight at that. So, I'd love to hear or have people post or share their packing list if they have it.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of endless lists out there, and Sarah had mentioned bikepacking.com has a pretty thorough list. I would add to those hardware, like extra screws, lock washers, things like that. All it takes is one bolt backing off of your rack, and you got a big problem to deal with. So, I think Justin asked about trail angels. I don't think there really are any. Not like the Pacific Crest Trail where people will leave things. Did you guys come across any stashes that people have left just for anyone to take?
Only from Chip. I was stoked. Yeah. But no, nothing else. Yeah.
Unless it was someone's water bottle that came off their bike, someone in front. I think I saw one water bottle, maybe somewhere on day one, like on Crane Mountain.
Garrett caught a couple of pollen at my water bottles, so
Yes.
thanks, Garrett.
That was great because I was able to drink the one and I was pretty thirsty. So,
So, back to Barry's question or comment about sort of organizing. Do you have a standard packing list, or is it kind of customized depending on the route that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have like a kind of general list and I like scrutinize it and I'm like cutting grams and then I like carry a giant tripod and like negate all of the weight savings that I did. But yeah, I mean, usually I will like list it out. I don't like weigh it or anything like that, but just to make sure that I don't forget stuff. And I'll kind of go through like a dress rehearsal where I pack everything. And then I do that like 2 days before the ride, and then I'll forget if I packed everything, and then I'll unpack it and repack it. So that's my horrible strategy, but yeah, I mean, it works.
Gotcha. All right.
yeah, I have a Apple Note that lives on my phone for always, but I would like to point out, just because I was the heaviest bike by far, because I was like touring registered. I did do the Grand Depart, but I was in the touring category. I wasn't particularly racing. I brought a ton of stuff overall, mostly because I was afraid of the route. So I packed my fears. I brought a ton of stuff. And it's definitely worthwhile to be cognizant of, is this a need or is this a want? And how long am I going to be carrying it versus how long am I going to be using it? Stove, for example, I use that for maybe 30 minutes a day, max. But I carried it for 14 hours. Is it really worth it? Is it a need or a want? And be really mindful of how many times you have to pick up your bike every day, which is some days, hundreds. It's no joke. You will lift over 100 logs in a day. So that's worth being mindful of like wants maybe on a different route. Needs are for sure.
So, did you happen to carry 32 pounds on your back and 50 pounds on your bike, or does Barry still have that trophy?
I think Barry, actually, you had more than me. That's fair.
So, for Chris and Sarah, any idea what aside from the weight of the bike, any idea how much weight you were actually carrying?
No.
No?
Yeah, I think I could volume probably 40 liters. Wait, yeah, 40 liters, but that's the volume, including the frame bag and stuff. But I don't know how much it weighed.
Yeah, I've always found that you're limited by real estate, not necessarily weight.
Yeah. And I'm really glad at the last minute that cause I had like a dry roll on the front, which like didn't have a lot of stuff on it. But when you are pushing uphill and like lifting uphill over logs and stuff, the front of the bike, the less weight you have on the front of the bike, the better. So I decided last minute to like pack a Dyneema backpack that I could just like take my dry bag off on the front and like throw it in there, and I just wore the backpack on the uphills and the like bushwhack parts, and then throw it back on, later when like things were fine. So that was like, I think if I hadn't done that, I would have been chasing Chris and Paul instead of maybe slightly in front of them.
Right, right, okay. There was an earlier question, different topic. Jeff Cohen had asked about rough averages of daily mileage. Understand that everyone's different. Like, how much, like that first 200 miles, Garrett? I think you said it took you 5 days to do it. Is that about right? Or were you guys, Sarah, Chris, did you guys take about that long, or how many miles were you getting in?
I think the first 200 miles were the slowest. I think I still managed to do like 50 or 55 miles a day, or in that range. Maybe 55, because I was at like 3.5 days. I rolled into Chemult at like 4 p.m. on the fourth day, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And similar to Sarah, like we were always like, how is Sarah she's always just ahead of us, just a little ways ahead of us. But it took Paul and I 4 days to roll into Chemult. And then, there was days where there was a day that we ended up meeting up with Garrett, and it was like a 70-mile day. But this was one of the detours where there was a lot of highway miles. So I think it depends a lot. And some of the days weren't as long. Like some of those first days in the first 4 days were like, I swear we're moving for like 13, 14 hours a day, 15 hours a day. And then I think kind of towards the end we could, I mean, they were still long days, but they weren't quite as long. But it's hard to put an average on it, because some days were like 70 miles, some days were more like 45, 50. But I guess if I did have to say an average, it probably would be right around 55.
So is the slowest section mainly in that first southern 200 miles, or I know that there's some brutal climbs out of Oak Ridge and farther on. What were the hardest sections?
Yeah, I do think it's that first 200. We got Kyle Cox on the call who did bunch grass, and that I think was absolutely the crux and the most brutal part. So Kyle would probably be able to say something about that, but I definitely think for me, the first 200 was the slowest bits.
Yeah, okay. So I know y'all were racing, but if you were taking your time, like where any good spots to hang out for a day, linger? Sarah, I know you got some swimming in, but that wasn't the main focus of winning, riding the.
Yeah, I think especially once we started doing the detours, I went swimming uh in Waldo Lake. They Shoot River was great. I took a detour
Yes.
there. Um, yeah, I think like for these really long, like 700 miles, even, and I don't know, and Kyle probably has some good input on this. But it's like, some days I was like, yeah, like I'm gonna just like, keep up at a good speed, maybe try and catch up to Sebastian, who was like always in front of me. And then other times I was like, I'm just gonna take a 2-hour stop here and like have a tuna tortilla like roll, and chit chat with some people. Actually, that was yeah, there was a bunch of times where I would stop and talk, and then that 1 or 2 hours that I was in front of Paul and Chris, it'd be gone because I'd just be talking to someone in the parking lot, and then they'd catch up and I'd be like, oh no, now I gotta go. That was a little off topic, but all that to say, like a lot of good spots. I think the first spot that stood out the most to me was between Chemult and Oak Ridge. There's like the Windy Lakes. So I stopped for a couple hours at Summit Lake, which I think there's like Diamond Peak in the distance. There's two really nice campgrounds, but like ones that I imagine they probably don't get too busy there, that like if you can time it right to hang out there, it looked pretty cool. And I think Summit Lake seemed like it had a lot less mosquitoes than the Windy Lakes right before it and the Timpanogos Lake after it. So that was like one of the first highlight spots in terms of like relaxing and going for a swim and stuff for me.
Garrett, you were in touring mode. Did you stop anywhere and linger?
I liked Sisters. I had a nice half a day there at least. As kind of around the topic of Trail Angels, there are some warm shower hosts along the way. I did stay with one in Klamath Falls, and I stayed with one in Sisters as well. Some nice people on that website. If you're a member there, it's a pretty good resource for cycle touring.
Sorry, what was the website?
Warm Showers?
Never heard of it.
Never. Oh, it's like it's couch surfing for cycle tourists. So
okay.
They pretty much, you only will get hosted if you're on a cycle tour. And there's a small donation or something like $20 a year to be a member, part of it. You can host, and they kind of expect you to host if you're going to be hosted. And I stayed with some folks off that website, which I utilize a lot when I'm cycle touring. So that was kind of cool. I stayed with someone, his sisters, and she kind of gave me some recommendations of some places to check out. I ate a bunch of donuts and had a good time. I didn't make it up to Oak Ridge because of one of my reroutes, because I was a little behind the pack and missed that segment. But I think I plan on spending like a half day at least in Oak Ridge and checking that stuff out. I love the Waldo Lakes area if you can deal with the mosquitoes. I thought that was beautiful. I kind of slowed down in that section a bit and had a nice trailside coffee. I think there's so many places to explore. There's so much beauty out there. Just amongst it. It's great.
Chris, I want to ask you that question, but I wanted to pose your question that you posed to Kyle. And Kyle, I apologize for this, but I want to call you out. Maybe you could share a little bit about your experience on Bunchgrass Ridge. If we can unmute him or not. There he is.
Yeah.
We'll give it a second because I'm curious. I've heard a lot about Bunchgrass Ridge.
Am I on?
I think you're on. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah, Bunchgrass Ridge. Yeah, I started that from Oak Ridge. I left Oak Ridge around midnight and kind of worked my way up to the Bunchgrass Trail. Got to the trailhead maybe around 3 or 4 a.m. And then after that, you're just I was in this huge burn area that probably hasn't seen any maintenance since the fire. But I heard that they just did some trail work up there, so it should be better this year. But yeah, it probably took me from the actual Bunchgrass trailhead to the end of Bunchgrass 10 hours.
Oh wow.
To get to the next water stop. So yeah, I think I carried 6 liters of water and I drank 5 liters, and that's like leaving at midnight from Oak Ridge. So I got to avoid a lot of the heat during that.
So was that mainly because of the climb, or was it technical? What's the challenge with Bunchgrass?
With Bunchgrass, you're just you had to hike your bike over a lot of just deadfall, and there was a little bit of wayfinding. I lost a trail on one part. Like I went down and I was supposed to go up. So I had to do that, like turn your bike sideways and lift it up and one step at a time. It was a good time.
If you say so. Chip, do you know, is Bunchgrass cleared, or is it still the 10-hour experience that Kyle went through?
I think there was a late summer trail work party that went up there and cut the logs out. At least it's still overgrown terribly, probably a lot of crap on the trail, so it's probably going to be a walker just like it was last year. It never was very rideable. It's a lousy trail.
But probably the only trail to keep the single track route. Is there I assume there's a good bypass.
No, there isn't. That's the problem.
Ah,
The highway is the only alternative, and it's a good way to die. There's the shuttle service from Oak Ridge up to Gold Lake, and that's what Garrett and Sarah and Chris did, and it's a great way to get up into the high country again and start having fun.
gotcha. Okay. Well, excellent. Kyle, thank you for jumping on and letting me call you out like that. Certainly interesting to hear about bunchgrass because I've heard it in a lot of different contexts.
Yeah, amazing views up there.
Yeah, well, assuming you're standing up and able to focus.
Right.
No. All right. Well, we are just about out of time. So I want to start wrapping up. I want to thank, first off, everyone that joined the call. Thank you so much for joining. We certainly appreciate it. These open houses have gotten a lot more attention than we expected, and it's been great, and it's been a lot of fun to put together. Thanks to our panelists, Sarah, Chris, and Garrett, and Chip. And Jeffrey and Sarah are both on the Eastern time zone, so it's pushing 11. Was it 10:30?
11. It's 11:30.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks so much for staying on late. As I mentioned earlier, we recorded this session. You can find it on our website and social media accounts. We'll likely be doing a post-season virtual open house sort of wrap up. Not as much of an information session, more of a story sharing and lessons learned session. So stay tuned for that on our website. If we didn't get to all your questions, took questions from the first open house and this open house, and that'll help us with presenting some questions or presenting information on our website. And again, if you can support the Oregon Timber Trail Alliance through donations or volunteering, that'd be great. I really appreciate that. And then again, if you have suggestions on how we do this open house, topics, or if there's other topics you'd want us to cover as a dedicated open house, please let us know. We can do that. I don't know if anyone has any final thoughts, but really appreciate everyone's time. And yeah, everyone have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, everyone.